Okay, so Freedom Flotilla Coalition is an international grassroots movement standing in solidarity with the people of Gaza. Their central mission is to dismantle illegal Israeli blockade on the Gaza Strip. So, formed in the wake of the 2010 Gaza Freedom Flotilla incident, where Israeli forces raided a humanitarian aid convoy and killed 11 activists, the FFC serves as a coordinating body for various local campaigns around the world. These campaigns work together to raise awareness about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza caused by the Israeli blockade. The FFC uses nonviolent direct action as a key strategy. This includes organizing flotillas carrying humanitarian aid in attempts to reach Gaza. Those efforts have been met with Israeli intervention, as you know. Beyond flotillas, the FFC works to expose human rights violations caused by the blockade and holds corporations and governments accountable for their role in upholding it. Yeah, so we will be sharing at the end a link to donate to the Freedom Flotilla Coalition and some other calls to action if you guys are able to do so. And Alex will talk a little bit more about that. I would like to introduce Alex and Kit. So first, Alex McDonald is a Quaker committed to the values of freedom and equality. He's a co-founder of the Texas Coalition for Human Rights that works to remove racist and religious bigotry from the Texas educational standards. He's been a presenter to the Texas Council for Social Studies, was part of an interfaith delegation of Palestine in 2017, and was on the crew of one of the 2018 Gaza Freedom Flotilla boats and the Handula boat in 2023 that brought international attention to the illegal Israeli blockade of Gaza. He spends a lot of time doing what no one else wants to do, which is talk to Zionists. He talks to Zionists to help them understand the truth that he sought out about Palestine, and has written 2 books so far on the matter to teach others how to do so as well. One of his books is called "How I Learned to Speak Israel: An American's Guide to Foreign Policy Language," and when they speak Israel, a guide to clarity and conversations about Israel. Yeah, that's Alex, and he'll tell a little bit more about himself as he goes through the presentation. And then we have Kit Kittredge, and Kit is a peace activist from Washington State involved with Code Pink, Veterans for Peace, Rachel Corrie Foundation, and Ground Zero Center for Nonviolence. She has been to Gaza 6 times, working in schools, hospitals, and children's organizations. She's part of the U.S. Boats to Gaza and Freedom Flotilla Coalition steering committees, and was a passenger on 2 ships in 2011, the Audacity of Hope and the Tahrir, where passengers were kidnapped and imprisoned by the Israeli Navy in international waters. In 2016, she was a passenger on the women's boat to Gaza. And this is my favorite part of her bio. She's a grandmother, a massage therapist, firefighter, and EMT. So just the coolest person around. So Alex and Kit, please take it away. Thank you for being here, and thank you for taking time out of your schedules to talk to us about Freedom Flotilla.
Thanks. Why don't we start by just telling you a little bit about how we got, neither one of us is Palestinian. And so maybe we'll start by just sharing how we got involved with this issue. Kit, you want to go first, or?
Sure. So in 2008, Operation Cast Lead 2009, and I was working with Code Pink, or playing with Code Pink, I like to say. And George Bush was doing his dastardly stuff, and Code Pink organized a delegation to go to Gaza, and I went. And it changed my life. My kids said, "Mom, you never were the same when you came back." And I wasn't. You know, you can't see what we know is happening there and not be changed, I don't think. So I became an activist, with Gaza being very much a forefront of a lot of my activities. And then I returned 5 other times.
And I grew up believing the standard narrative that we hear in the news and get in schools and so on. And then in the early 2000s, about 2003, I heard on the news that they were building a wall in the West Bank. And at that time, I had understood that Palestinians lived in the West Bank and Gaza, and that Jews lived in Israel. And so if you wanted, and what I'd been taught was Palestinians were the terrorists. And so if you wanted to keep the terrorists, keep the Jews safe, you put a wall between them. But they said on the news that it was being in the West Bank. And so that's weird. Then you've got Palestinians on both sides. What's the purpose of the wall then? And I started researching, and sure enough, the wall was weaving throughout the West Bank. And then I researched more, and then I learned that 20% of Israeli citizens are actually Palestinian. So there was 1.5 million of these, quote, terrorists on the wrong side of the wall. And from then on, I did more and more research. And the more I researched, the more I realized that that what I'd been taught was incorrect, was inaccurate. And then the more I researched, the more I realized the United States is complicit in the oppression of the Palestinian people. And therefore I got involved in activism on this issue because I felt it was a duty and a responsibility as an American. So with that, we'll jump in to our presentation. And Kit will start off by, I'll go ahead and show slides, but Kit will start with just explaining a little bit what the Freedom Flotilla is.
Well, I feel like she did an excellent job of explaining, but we are a nonviolent grassroots solidarity movement, and our main goal is working to end the illegal Israeli blockade. We work with our partners in Gaza, and we stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. That's part of our, and we have many partners there that we confer with, and that's a pivotal point to how we operate. You know, we're always checking in and seeing, okay, what's needed, how can we do this, what's our best way. We are not numbers is something that we've worked with quite a lot, and yeah, but I feel like Aiden, you did a great job of explaining who we are and what we do. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll just build on what Kit said, that the Freedom Flotilla Coalition is a coalition, as the name implies, of campaigns from almost a dozen countries.
Yeah.
And Kit and I are part of the U.S. Boats to Gaza, which is the U.S. member of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition. So let's jump into a little bit of the history. Most of you probably know this, so I'll run through it quickly, but I think it's important to understand some big picture context, especially with all the recent attention on Gaza and so on. So this is a series of 4 maps of the region. It's basically, in the first one, the green was land. The white is land that was purchased and owned by Jewish owners, and this is dated 1947, when the UN did a partition plan, passed it, and there's a lot behind that. There's a lot, but in any event, the partition plan was a gerrymandered way of dividing the country. At that time in 1947, 1/3 of the population was Jewish. It had only been about 10% in 1917. So the British ran Palestine from roughly 1920 to 1948. And in that time, especially the beginning, they had opened unlimited Jewish migration. But in any event, still in 1947, they only owned just under 7% of the land. And at that time, they comprised roughly 1/3 of the population after the 30 years, or a little bit more than 30 years of intensive migration. But the UN chose to divide the land this way. And when people look at the map, so the white, which was 56%, was to go to a Jewish majority state, and the green was to be an Arab majority state. By Jewish majority, it was only 55% Jewish majority, 45% Arab. The Arab state was 99% Arab. So that shows you how it, and I don't know if you've ever noticed, but you see this little dot here, that's Jaffa. And Jaffa was included in the Arab state, because if they didn't include that, then both states would be Arab majority. So it was completely, that's why I say gerrymandered. In 1948, as I'm sure most, if not all of you know, there was what's Palestinians called a Nakba. It was basically a war between the Zionist militias and initially the Palestinian militias, and then ultimately in May of 1948, other Arab armies moved in. But the net of it ended up being Gaza became part. Egypt gained control of it. Jordan gained control of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, including East Jerusalem, and Israel declared itself a state and on this land. Today's situation is really the situation where we have Gaza, and the West Bank has been chopped up into what they call areas A, B, and C, where Israel controls all of it, really, but gives minimal authority to Palestinians in these different areas. But I think it's important that you understand this history as we move forward. As we look at Gaza, and specifically Gaza, you see how small it is here. The whole population of Israel is roughly 9 million people. 2 million people live here. And so that gives you the idea of the density of the population in Gaza. And the reason it's so dense is because during this fighting, the Zionist militias forced out the majority of Palestinians who lived in this white area. And a lot of them went to Gaza, to the West Bank, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. But the reason that it became so densely populated is because 70% roughly of the people in Gaza are refugees whose homes and lands are in what is now called Israel. It's a young population. By the way, this data is an updated presentation from 2018, and I thought it was best to minimally change it so that you all could see the view that we had of the situation in 2018. And the reason I say that is because there's been so much emphasis on the last 5 months since quote October 7th, and as if that was the beginning of things. I'm wanting to show you the world even as we saw it in 2018, 5 years before October 7th. So and anyway, so roughly now the median age is 18. So half the population are children, and again the density. And even then we called it a man-made inhumane catastrophe. That the water, for example, is mostly undrinkable. That the sewage system has been destroyed repeatedly by the Israeli bombardment. At that time, an 11-year-old had never seen more than 12 hours of electricity a day. Even today, this is 6 years later, now a 17-year-old child has never seen a full day of electricity. And there are a lot of things about daily life that we just take for granted in the United States, but 70% of the schools in Gaza operate on 2 shifts because of the limited space, because of the limited resources, and so on. So you can imagine there's a morning group and then an afternoon group. Another thing to know about the history of Gaza is we've talked about 1948 when all the refugees were created, the first set of refugees. It's continued since. But in 2018, starting in March, the Palestinians have always claimed that they have a right to return, which is an international right. The Geneva Convention supports it and so on. But they did a march starting every Friday in March of 2018, called the March of Return, the Great March of Return. And this was not organized by Hamas or any PA or so on. It was a civil organization, and it was huge. And during that time, Israeli snipers on the other side of the Gaza fence shot these are just pictures from that time. If you're ever interested in a good film on that, it's Abby Martin's Gaza Fights for Freedom. And it shows footage from the events, but you can just see at the devastation and the significant peaceful protests, and yet the Israelis were shooting on the Gaza side of the fence, journalists, medics, and so on. The net result, and again, this is what we're seeing in even greater scale today, but we have all these amputees in Gaza. One thing of note in those days in 2018 was the use of expanding bullets. These are special bullets that when they hit impact, they they explode, making the damage to the person significantly worse. So these are, it's a way of maiming the recipients of these bullets, if you will, more painful and more devastating for the rest of their lives. The Israelis use Gaza as a testing bed for their weaponry. So in a sense, the people of Gaza are guinea pigs, and they advertise that when they go to weapons fairs and so on. We hear a lot in the United States of, or at least I've heard in the media, mentioned that the number of Israelis killed on October 7th was the greatest number since the Holocaust. I think it's important to note how, 1,139 is a significant loss, and I mourn the death of every human being. I also think it's important, though, that we keep it in context. In 2014, 2,200 Palestinians were killed by Israel in Operation, I think that was Protective Edge. In 2008 and 9, it was December and then of 2008, January of 2009, 1,417 Palestinians were killed. So for the Israelis, 1,139 is a lot. It's huge, because in those days they had 13 lost in 2008 and 9, including of friendly fire, which means Israelis killing Israelis. They were so indiscriminate in their shooting that they actually shot some of their own. But still, they had only 13 losses versus over 100 times as many Palestinians. So I think it's really important to understand the scale of losses. And so here's a graph of the number of casualties of both Palestinians and Israelis since September of 2000. And so you can see that, and this is through October 6th, the day before October 7th, okay? And you can see that every year there are, except for a few, hundreds and hundreds of Palestinians killed. And as we see here in 2014, over 2,000, and here over 1,000. And remember, 8 and 9, that was one war, December of 2008 and January of 2009. So you can see when people talk about, as if the world, all the killing started on October 7th, look at the 20 years prior. If we include October, since then, starting at the same point but going on, we see, yes, this is the Israeli loss on October, in this latest escalation. But even then, as I mentioned, it's half the size of this one, and roughly, and smaller than these when they're combined. And then obviously look at the consequences. So I think it's important to understand the big picture. Israel also uses white phosphorus, which is considered a chemical weapon when used in populated areas. And unfortunately, the United States never vetoes security councils for any violations of human rights or war crimes that Israel commits. So the U.S. is very, very complicit in the impunity that Israel holds. This is not even of this war. This is of 2014, and it's much worse today. So, as I've mentioned, water is an issue. 97% of the Gaza water has been unfit for human consumption because of the blockade, and that's what the Freedom Flotilla is fighting to end. Because of the blockade, medicines aren't allowed in sufficient amounts. We have transfers when patients need to get treatment elsewhere because Israel limits the kind of equipment that is allowed into Gaza for medical use. Kid, do you want to go into more some of this on the medical side, or?
Well, I just want to say, this is since 2007, and with the 6 trips that I took going over there, it was so noticeable each time how all of the facilities, all of the supplies were diminished more and more, and especially with the particular bombings that had happened in between. So where water treatment were demolished, and the sewage treatment was destroyed, and more to that 50% of Palestinian children counseling. There were more and more children needing extensive help. There were deaf centers, which I think I just heard that it was destroyed just very recently, because there are many traumatized children. So PTSD, pretty much, I would say everybody there has PTSD now, and most people did have it when I went, even in 2009. So it's just, exponentially, and with all the services, medicines, less. So it's, yeah.
Thanks. One thing, Kit mentioned PTSD. The only situation that I've heard since that is Gaza. They have a term now, CTSD, continuous traumatic stress disease.
Right.
Because there is never a post.
No. That's duly noted. That's very true.
So as we go on, for some reason, let me try to get my screen share working here. There we go. And again, these are slides from 2018. And so today's situation is even worse. But again, I'm trying to point out 2018 because this is not a new problem. This has been an issue. This is a consistent, this is like water torture. It's drip, drip, drip, drip, and it's been going on for decades, unfortunately. And we've sort of covered these issues.
I just wanted to add to Alex too, with the lack of electricity, which has always been a problem, as you mentioned. Then they use generators a lot, and when my husband and I were working in the hospitals there was an exorbitant amount of people who were trying to tap in to the wires that were hot, and it was a whole new, type of injury that existed in mass there. So 13-year-olds and people just trying to get electricity and getting electrocuted and not dying either. It's just being zombies then. So it was that was another, just on the side, and the whole hospital ward was full of that.
So I'm very involved with this because as an American, I take responsibility for a lot of what's going on. And Israel is the largest recipient historically of foreign aid, and Egypt is second. And the only reason is because Egypt plays along with Israel's requests, and the U.S. supports that. So it's significant, the aid that we give to Israel. The United States also guarantees Israel military superiority, and over all of its neighbors combined. And this is documented in the records of U.S. policy, so that basically that again provides impunity by that U.S. endorses. We have used the most of our vetoes in the Security Council in the last 30 years have been to protect Israel. In other words, more than half of the vetoes are there to protect and Israel complains that over and over issues come up that are critical of Israel, and the reason is because they're never addressed, and it's the same ones coming over and over, and Israel continues, and that's why there are these continuous efforts by other countries to raise the issue. You all are, I'm sure, familiar with the Trump administration moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, which is illegal under international law because in fact East Jerusalem is part of the West Bank, and more recently I added this last one. This is not 2018, but since the October escalation, the U.S. has vetoed every single one of the ceasefire resolutions. So we are definitely involved and responsible. I consider this sort of a cancer in the sense that it's really a destructive process and policy within the United States. In 2016, when I was following this very closely for writing my book, the largest funders had one primary issue of both Republican and Democratic parties. And Sheldon Adelson, who is now deceased, but his wife continues, contributed over $5 million to Trump's campaign that year. Hillary's largest contributors gave over $10 million, and they had one issue: protecting Israel. And so, in every single one except of the Republican and Democratic candidates for president spoke to AIPAC, which is an organization that lobbies for Israel, and except for Bernie, who didn't. So think about it. Any other country, can you imagine even England, the United Kingdom, or France, or Germany, every single US president going to speak to the lobbying organization for a foreign country, basically endorsing them and supporting them? I mean, it's scary, frankly. And more on a local level, 38 US states have passed legislation to shield Israel from criticism. I live here in Texas, and we have anti-BDS laws, which prevent companies from doing business with the state of Texas if they boycott Israeli goods. Also, if you're not familiar with the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, you need to learn about it, because it conflates in ways the criticism of Israel and Zionism with being racist against Jews, which are very different things. And by doing so, it can be problematic for people who are just standing for equality and standing for human rights. So I included this. This is the part of the Declaration of Independence, and I'm just throwing this in here because the question is, what do we as Americans should we be standing for? That all men and women, by the way, they didn't think of that back then, but are created equal. That we should have inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That the purpose of government is to help meet those needs, and then whenever any form of government becomes destructive to those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute new government. And that's what the Palestinians are doing. And so, when a lot of the media pundits talk about Israel being closest to American values, in fact, I believe it's the Palestinians. So, all right. Kit, why don't you talk about the different boats and missions that we've had historically?
Okay, I'm just going to start at the top left, and that's the Free Gaza movement that was started actually in 2006. We kind of derived out of that, and it was So that was a Free Gaza symbol there with the yellow sails. And Freedom Ways to Gaza is a 2011 sailing, and that was the Tahrir with the Canadian boat and the Irish boat, the Circe. And then we have the Ship to Gaza, Sweden. That's just their main emblem there. And to the right of that, Freedom Flotilla 2, and that was the Mavi Marmara in 2010. And I'm not sure if you all, I think probably a lot of people have heard of that, but we have pictures of that later on. We can talk more about it, but that was that was what Freedom Flotilla 2 was. Freedom Flotilla Coalition, that is our, emblem there. And the 2015 Freedom Flotilla mission was the Swedish sailboat, the Marianne, and they were quite severely tased and kidnapped and interrogated, imprisoned and deported, which is pretty much the standard procedure when we sail, and we don't have to be even we're in international waters. They come out to us with the boats. So, but that's what they do, and it's gotten progressively much more aggressive. The Canadian boat to Gaza, that was the Tahrir in 2011. Gaza's Ark, that's the one where we encouraged and supported the building of an ark inside of Gaza to export Gazan products. And we have pictures of that will be coming up. The Israeli offensive forces destroyed it. Luckily, no one was killed, but the Palestinians tried to rebuild it, and then the 2014 war destroyed it completely. And then the Jewish boat to Gaza is exactly that. It was a Jewish boat, and that was in 2010, and there were 8 passengers on that. And again, it was people were arrested and put into prison and interrogated. And then the Irene is the name of the Jewish boat, actually, I found out. So there we go.
So you want to talk about this picture?
Yes, I do. So this is the Liberty. This is the picture of the Free Gaza boat that went in. It had 44 passengers, and it broke the illegal blockade. There were only 5 successfully sailed missions that got into Gaza, and we have sailed 35 actually boats to Gaza total. So they pretty much caught on, and that was the end of that after these the Liberty. And notice how packed it is there in the port. The Gaza city the port is quite small but mighty. It's amazing what they do there with the fishers and all. But they were so excited to see this boat come in. And so that was the Free Gaza movement. And it's pretty remarkable. That was before I was very involved with it. And this is the Mavi Marmara. And that's one that we had mentioned earlier. And it is the largest flotilla that was sponsored. And it was sponsored by the Turkish Foundation, İHA it's called. 581 passengers on 7 boats challenging the blockade. And it was quite remarkable because there were so many people out there in the Mediterranean headed to Gaza. And as many of you probably know, the Israeli Offense Forces very violently attacked all the boats, and they killed 10 people and wounded over 50. All the passengers were assaulted, kidnapped, interrogated, imprisoned, and then deported. But it was one of the most horrific times that we've had on any of our sailings. And then they returned the boat back to Turkey with blood on its deck still. I mean, so that was the Mavi Marmara, and Colonel Ann Wright, our friend, was on one of the boats. And then, many people. And this is the U.S. boat to Gaza, Audacity of Hope. And this is when 9 ships were leaving from Greece. And basically, the Israeli government paid the Greek government to stop us. And the Greek naval commandos did, 5 miles offshore. Some boats were sabotaged in some of the ports. We were in Athens with this. And so that none of the boats ended up going because of the Greek naval commandos stopping us. So that was unfortunate. And then we have the women's boat to Gaza. So I was on the Audacity, and I was on the women's boat. And like as it says, Maureen McGuire there from Ireland. She's the Nobel Peace Laureate. And then we had 2 members of parliament. One woman's from Sweden, and I believe the other one, they were both from the EU. And we had 2 small sail ships, and the Mediterranean was extremely rough. A lot of people got very sick, but the Zaytuna was the only one that made it on out. The Amal was had problems, and so it couldn't cross over. But again, they were, arrested and put into prison and then deported.
So this is a map of the 2018 flotilla, and you'll notice that we have 2 paths here. One is going through, this is the canals of Europe. These canals were built long before cars, when canals were an efficient way, and they're still used for commercial traffic. And then the larger boats, we had 2 smaller sailboats that went through the canals, and we had 2 larger boats go through by the sea. And Kit was responsible for the land crews on this voyage. Kit, why don't you describe a little bit what land crew does and so on?
Well, we were basically, it was about a 2-month period of time going from Northern Europe down, and the land crew goes from port to port, sets up places for people to shower, where they're going to get food. We get up at 2 a.m. or whenever the boat's coming into port and meet it and organize. All of these ports had wonderful events, and we'd have hundreds and thousands of people in each port sometimes. And so that's part of our educational piece, and garnering, support and solidarity for the Palestinians, so they can see how much people are really working for their freedom. And so, port to port, driving boats, trains, planes, and automobiles. And it's a really fun way to be a part of it. And we are doing a flotilla this summer for 2 months. So if some folks are drawn to that type of, land crew, that's really super important. And it's a lot of hard work, but it's a lot of fun.
So I was actually on a boat. I was on land crew for one of the big boats on the ocean side, and then I was on land crew for a week. On the boat crew for a week as it went through France. And what we're going to do is show you a quick video of the complicity and the power that the Israeli government has over other governments. I've told you how it has a lot of influence in the United States, but this and Kit mentioned how Greece was bought off as well. I'm going to show a quick video here of the experience going through Paris.
Ça allait provoquer un accident. Regardez pas comme ça, madame. Madame, moi je vais avoir un accident là.
Mais on n'est pas en Israël ici quand même.
I just want to make sure, is the sound working okay?
Yeah.
Great.
What are you doing? On n'est pas en Israël.
Hey, sit. I can't stay.
Alors, ils ont contrôlé si nous avions une gaffe en plastique, si nous avions les papiers qu'il fallait, bien sûr, si nous avions un extincteur, si nous avions une écope, enfin bon, tout.
Après, l'autorisation préfectorale, c'est bien, mais si vous n'avez pas la minute BNF,
Très bien, parfait.
Très bien.
It's okay.
Ok.
Un extincteur.
This one. I have anchor. Yes, anchor. We have an extra too.
Ces bateaux font partie de la flottille internationale de la liberté qui, tous les 2 ans environ, tente de briser le blocus illégal de Gaza. Ils sont partis cette fois-ci de Suède et de Norvège. Et 2 bateaux sont passés par la mer et 2 autres par les fleuves et les canaux.
La réglementation fluviale, tout banderole pour une publicité, une revendication, c'est interdit. C'est une contravention.
Ces policiers qui nous harcèlent depuis ce matin nous ont dit tout et n'importe quoi, tout et son contraire d'ailleurs, que ce soit la vitesse du bateau, ils ont essayé de nous forcer à aller plus vite, puis moins vite, puis passer par-ci, par-là. Si les États et si les gouvernements ne font pas les pressions indispensables sur Israël, qui est un État voyou, qui massacre, qui tue les enfants, les infirmières, les journalistes, si ces États ne font rien, c'est effectivement la population civile, nous les citoyens, les citoyennes, qui prenons les choses en main, qui disons bon ça suffit, on ne peut pas laisser continuer cette violence coloniale. Nous apportons notre solidarité au peuple palestinien de Gaza. On est dans une dérive extrêmement grave de l'État français. Ici, ils interdisent à des bateaux qui ont une vocation pacifique. La politique française actuelle prend une tournure qui est extrêmement inquiétante.
Okay. So, so that just gives you an idea of the interactions that we have with governments wherever we go. This is another boat that one of the 4 in 2018, and as Kit mentioned, when we do get in international waters approaching Gaza, the Israelis take control, hijack our boat, basically. And they pirate the boat in international waters, again, against international law, and then take the boats to Israel. Then I've never done this, so it's really Kit to describe, but they interrogate the passengers and ask them this. Maybe Kit, you can describe what they do when they interrogate and so on, and hold you in prison.
Well, I never was injured physically, but I know our last boat was, and they broke ribs and they tasered, and I think they tasered our captain on one of the boats in the boathouse, and they tried to they circled around and round and round the Saoirse boat from Ireland, and they tried to sink it, and then they rammed it. They've rammed boats. That's very common. And oftentimes they put on some of their very younger recruits. They look like they were 15, and it's just a training. You know, they practice their mission of intimidation and violence, and they use our missions as, places to practice. But in prison, basically, they take everything away. They bang on the doors. They turn the lights on and off. And they never tell you when you're going to be able to leave. You contact your country, but you don't really hear much from them, from the prison. But a lot of people had other experiences that were much more violent. Yeah.
And personal things like people's watches and things of that nature are not returned in
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So this was the crew of that boat, and I wanted to point out one person in particular here, Joe Metters. He's an American. He's a survivor of the USS Liberty. And for those of you who may not be familiar with USS Liberty, it was an American intelligence ship that was off the coast of Egypt, actually, in the 1967 Six-Day War. And they were listening on to the chatter, and Israel attacked the ship, tried to sink it, both with its Air Force and its Navy. And in fact, the U.S. Thought it was a false flag, thought it was Egyptian, and although the people on the boat knew it wasn't, but the U.S. sent fighters to go to bomb Egypt, and were returned in midair. It was that close of an event. But in any event, he's a survivor. There were how many killed? Do you remember?
No, I was trying to remember.
39 or and there are over 170 injured.
A lot.
And
yeah, forgot the number.
yeah, but in any event, look up USS Liberty. It's something that the survivors are still asking for a congressional investigation. Again, this shows the complicity of the U.S. government. The U.S. government will not even support the service members in doing a congressional investigation. We've had some, I don't know if you all are familiar with the cartoonist Latouf. He's done a number of cartoons about the Freedom Flotilla. This is an interesting picture. This is one of the other big boat or bigger boat that went on there. And Kit mentioned the sabotage and so on. There was actually a spy, an Israeli spy on this boat. And Israel ended up doing a TV program based on the coverage of the spy. All right. Kit, why don't you talk about some of the things that we do there?
Well, we often do as much room as we have, or as little room as we have. We usually do try to take some supplies that the Palestinians have identified that they're wanting. If it goes in, though, the Israelis generally get it, but we are just showing we are taking in humanitarian supplies. I know with when I was on the Tahrir, we had wheelchairs, and Israel, when we came into Ashdod port, they offloaded them, said they would take them to Gaza. Well, they did, but it was a few years later, and they were all trashed and broken, as were some of the boxes were ripped open. So, you know, they took it, but they demolished it. So we just try to work. We oftentimes, Freedom Flotilla, we work with all the campaigns, and we've sent ambulances to Gaza quite often. That's one of the common things we do. We work with the Kia Ora New Zealand campaign a lot, and we try to get ambulances in there as much as we can. But our main goal is solidarity and education and ending the siege of Gaza.
Yeah, the blockade is our primary emphasis. We're not an organization whose objective is to get supplies there. There are great organizations that do that. Our goal is to break the blockade, because it's only by breaking the blockade that people in Gaza can sustain themselves. All right, so then we have last year's flotilla. We did not go all the way to, since Israel confiscates the boats historically, we wanted to get an extra year out of a boat. And so what we did is we did educational tours in Europe last summer. Went from Scandinavia through Scotland, England. Kit did a stop Ireland, and then we did Wales, the Netherlands,
Sweden, did you say? Yeah.
Yeah, we did, and then Denmark and so on. So Germany. So we try to go to populated areas, so we get plenty of, you can see here for the children of Gaza, we fly the Palestinian flag. We get all kinds of, usually the wonderful feedback, and we're there also to support. We get inspired by and inspire solidarity groups. So here we are participating in a march in Cardiff in Wales with them. The guy in the front right was one of the captains of our boat, who's from Cardiff. So anyway, it's very much a solidarity building effort. So what's next? We have two efforts this year. There's a one that's we're working with other organizations to try to. This one is more focused on getting cargo to the desperate situation right now in Gaza, and plans are being updated daily because there are so many moving parts. And then we have plans for the summer for the same boat to do its second year and do its go throughout Europe with educational port stops, as well as again trying to break the blockade of Gaza this summer. So join us. We appreciate any donations. usboatstogaza.org, and you can click on the give button. We welcome people who are interested in volunteering. There's a lot to do, from social media to messaging and so on. As Kit described, land crew, event planning, fundraising, and then we are also looking for crew members or participants. We really like to get, if you know of anybody who's newsworthy, because part of our goal is to raise awareness of the situation of the blockade and the situation in Gaza. And news media are much more interested if there's somebody who's famous, a celebrity or something. So if you know anybody like that, our email address is there. So please reach out to us. And those are both our website for US Boats to Gaza, and then of the parent coalition, freedomflotilla.org. And with that, I'm going to thank you and open it up for questions.
Thank you guys. This was awesome.
So we do have a question from an attendee. What are some common misconceptions you have seen among people when you educate them in other countries?
I can tell you, this is partly answering that question, but I was on the dock in France, and next to the nice thing about docks, it's probably more like New Orleans, frankly, is that the piers are in town where people are walking as opposed to like away from everything. And so these people were walking, and it was actually a Jewish couple who approached and said, you know, why are you supporting terrorists? And I said, well, I can tell you why I'm here. I said, I stand for human rights. I said, do you stand for human rights? Do you believe it? And he says, yes. And I said, and I stand for equality, but there should not be any discrimination. And he said, yes. I said, may I give you a hug? And I gave him a big bear hug, which is not very French. They don't do that very often. And his guys, when we parted, I mean, his eyes looked like they were popping out of his head. And but there was nothing else to say. I mean, that's why we're here. We're standing for the humanity and standing for our fellow human beings. And that's why I'm involved with this. And everything else is noise. And so that's part of the misconception. You know, his view was, oh, this is supporting terrorists. No, this is standing for human rights. I don't know if you want to share a story, Kit, of interactions you've had.
I just, I don't have a specific story, but I just hear the so common misinformation that people are so readily gobble up, and just trying to share my experiences, share my trips to Palestine and what I found and what I did there, and the reality on the ground for me. They were the most welcoming people I've ever met, and very family oriented. I just kind of tried to talk about human value systems that we all, most, you know, communities, peoples on the planet share, and just say, you know, They would open their doors, they would feed us, we would play, they loved music, walks on the beach, into sports, you know, just creating the humanity picture of what I experienced and how I never experienced any violence when I was in Palestine other than from the Israelis. So, and you know, that's in a tightly, it's like, well, you know, it's a 2.5 million or 2.3 million and packed in that tiny little spot, totally stressed out from being bombed and everything, but they maintained their humanity. And that just speaks volumes to me anywhere that happens, and especially in a place that isn't so challenged as Palestine has been over the last years, decades. So I just try to create that picture and say, this is my experience. This is, you know, and I love going to Palestine, and yeah. So and it's a picture that they, you know, what they're going to tell me that didn't happen. It's like, no, I was there for months, you know? So, yeah, that's all just that inconsistency and, you know, being unable to see them as human even, you know, that just does not resonate for me. So I create a human picture and this beautiful picture of what I hold in my heart there.
So we have another question. What new challenges or support do you anticipate you might face this summer?
Bombs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, we've always expected that that there was a high probability of being arrested on the last leg. We've had the boat sabotage before, so I remember my first duty was you know, 24/7 watch of a boat on the land crew to make sure that, you know,
Yeah.
weren't messing with it. But you know, this is a little different. So we want to be careful for passengers, and we don't want to do anything stupid. But there is no new normal. They say there's a new normal. I don't think it's a new normal yet.
Yeah.
And so
it's very unpredictable. I mean, and we have witnessed, it doesn't matter if you're American or doesn't matter at all. And I was very just casual, I would have to say, saying I can go, I'm gonna go because I'm an American and they won't, you know, harm me. I wouldn't say that now because they already have. They've already murdered Americans. So it's a different ball game, and they are given carte blanche by all these amazing, you know, countries all over the world, and our UN can't stop them the way it's set up. And it's just, it's showing what a dysfunctional system we have, which we really need to fix. And I have to say that I think I wouldn't put anything past them at this point. So I don't think we can be too careful, and we always are extremely careful, but it's at another level now.
So Kit,
we're brave and determined.
You mentioned some of the violence that Americans have experienced at Israel's hands before. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like going on the flotilla in 2011, just a year after 11 people were killed?
Well, you know, on the 2011, I didn't go into Gaza in 2011. So I was just on part of the legs of it, if I'm remembering correctly. Is that right? Is that my right boat? Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I did actually. I'm sorry. Whoop. I'm getting all these dates mixed up. So it was a bit scarier because of what the Israelis did when they came to our boat. And they were, you know, they shoot the water cannons at us. They try to, like I was saying, spin you around so that it starts going over. They tried to get both of our boats to crash into each other, you know, just like these naval manipulations that they are practicing on us. And they were more violent with our captain, which I hadn't seen before. And yeah, with the tasers. And it was a different level it was a different level than what I had experienced before.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you didn't really know, I mean, once you were in prison and you didn't really know what was going to happen, as far as I could be here a week or I could be here 2, or, it was a lot of unknown. But we had wonderful crew members with us, so that was good. And the Irish sang and got us out in the hall, and we sang and did all kinds of things to build up our spirits. But the unknown, kind of, how long you'd be in there. And we didn't really know if they were going to get violent at some point. But, it was a whole different thing.
So we have another question in the chat. Was there any response to the killing of those 11 people by their respective governments?
So just to be clear, I believe the number is that 9 were killed on the boat. 1 went into a coma, who died ultimately from that coma. So a total of 10.
Mm-hmm.
The one was an American. He was dual citizen, American Turkish. United States, does very little, if anything. And the Turkish government did at one point, I don't know, did they recall their ambassador, something of that nature. There was some, I believe, minimal compensation, but it was, I believe in the tens of thousands of dollars per person. I mean, just, piddly. But then Turkey resumed its relations with Israel, although Turkey's been on and off critical of the Israeli policies. Is that fair, Kit?
Yeah. From my understanding, yeah. I know Anne Wright was on the boats, and so she would probably have some more
Absolutely
to add. But I know it was very terrifying for all the boats. They all were treated extremely, violently. Basically, there was no shortage of tasing and beating and shooting. Yeah.
So the flotilla is a global movement, a global coalition. Can you tell us a little bit about how the different chapters and campaigns collaborate and strategize together?
With a lot of meetings. Especially right now, since we're working toward sailing this summer. But we have, and we're all different time zones, right? So we have Malaysia and Australia and New Zealand and Turkey and, South Africa. So that's a little bit of a challenge, but that's a small challenge compared to the bigger ones that we're talking about. But we basically have different groups. We have the media group, we have logistics, we have fundraising, and people plug in. Each campaign kind of has different people who do those things, but we're really small. The U.S. campaign, basically, what are there, 5 of us now, Alex? Yeah, so we're giant, 5 of us that are, doing and that's just the U.S. campaign. And then some of us do the flotilla, the FFC meeting, which is with all the campaigns. So there's the U.S. boat meetings, and then they each have their meetings, and then we all get together usually once or twice. Now it's pretty much every Sunday, planning for this summer.
But we're looking for volunteers, so we can grow U.S. boats.
Yeah, it's fun. It's good, folks.
Anyone listening who wants to sign up, please visit the flotilla website.
Yeah.
Or reach out to us, and we'll talk to Alex and Kit about how to get you involved.
Be great.
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
So I just want to. Are there other questions?
Yeah, we do have a few other questions. But if you have another point to build off what Kit was saying.
I just want to emphasize. I think it's right now in this dire situation. It's important for aid to get there, but the concern I have, even as we all stand for getting an immediate ceasefire, a ceasefire only gets us back to the oppression that was there before. And what we need is a long-term solution And that requires an end to occupation and an end to the blockade. And that's why we're here. That's what the flotilla is about, is to emphasize ending the blockade. And so I just want, with all these issues and all this immediacy that's going on, we need to not just stop the bleeding. We need to figure out the real solution, what's cutting, and that's the blockade and occupation. So I just wanted everybody to have that in perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, on that note, Alex and Kit as well, say the blockade is lifted, does the Flotilla Coalition envision a role for itself long-term in ending the occupation, in Palestinian liberation past the blockade?
That's a very good question.
I look forward to that situation where we have to deal with that problem.
Yeah, inshallah. I don't see myself personally or the groups that I feel like we're working with. I think we're in it for the long haul, for whatever we need to do to help, if that does happen, to help facilitate and do whatever they need us to do to help them along.
I think they're hand in hand.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to get rid of one and keep the other. But it doesn't matter. The issue is, from my standpoint as an American, I can't be supporting the oppression.
Mhm.
That's just me.
Yeah.
Another question, do you have medical staff on board the flotillas?
Yes.
Yeah, we do. Like I'm an EMT, so that's what I was doing on the boat. I didn't have to do any, which was very lucky, but we always have some medical person on the boat.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a question specifically for you, Kit. As a massage therapist and activist, how do you stay grounded and move through, balance out, process, and have boundaries with what you choose to take on in the world?
Well, if you talk to my husband, he'd probably say she hasn't been doing it very well lately. I am an organic farmer. So when I have my hands in the dirt, or if I'm outside, then that's what I do. And I listen to music and I dance and I play with my grandkids. And being outside is very important to me, but being in the dirt really helps me a lot. So those are my main things. And I like to go to the school and I do reading with the elementary kids, and that's always a good shot in the arm too, because that's the children. The children are what we're doing.
It's beautiful.
Trying to hand it off to a better place.
Alex, how about you? How do you maintain emotional, psychological boundaries? How do you stay grounded during this?
I want to tell you, I'm so inspired. When I did my trip to Palestine, I realized, and you asked earlier, what are some misconceptions and so on, and often people in the United States say, well, all they do is terrorism, in terms of, because that's what gets in the news. And I said, when I went there, what I saw were millions of people who were just staying in their place. And that was the most nonviolent protest, because they would have a better life if they left somewhere else. They would have a lot easier time. Their dignity would not be attacked every day, but they chose instead to just stay in their houses. And I said, what an amazing, inspiring form of peaceful protest. And millions of people. And so that's sort of when I hear Palestinians like Haneen Zoabi, who used to be a Knesset member from Nazareth, and people ask her, do you continue this struggle because you're optimistic or pessimistic? She says, neither. She says, I continue the struggle because to abandon the struggle is to give up my humanity. And that grounds me.
Wow, that's definitely a quote we all need to hold on to right now. Another question, talk to us about the Israeli spy. I knew this was gonna gonna come up. Any insights you have there? Were either of you on that mission?
I was not on that boat. I mean, what we've learned is that we need to be more careful in who we have as participants. So I hope you'll fill in the application, but do expect some, not everybody will get on, right?
I hope everyone here would be a trustworthy companion.
Me too.
You do.
Yeah, I wasn't on that boat either. I was on the land crew then. And so I didn't know the ins and outs of that, but it actually piqued my interest when Alex mentioned it this last time we were looking through the picture. It was like, that was the one. And I was like, oh, so I'm kind of curious. I got a hold of our Canadian friends and said, I want to talk to you about this and see how it really came down on the boat and all. So yeah, we have to be super careful. We're always on guard, to be honest. And yeah, it's challenging, but very worthwhile and very heartening. And especially when we get to interface with our Palestinian, friends in Gaza and the West Bank, wherever, just if we get to, hear from them and see how they're doing. Right now it's not, we can't talk to them that much, but when they know we're coming or we're working with them, it's very heartening to have those conversations and be inspired by each other, really.
I'm not sure if you are both seeing the chat, but we actually do have a friend from Gaza here with us, Mohammed. He is a local food blogger here in New Orleans. His family's from Gaza. He says, can y'all smuggle me in? But in all seriousness, thank you for what you do.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you for your
We love
humanity.
Mo.
And I think there are a lot of organizations here that are actually trying to help people get out, so that's been another whole element that, and a lot of people, like we've said, don't want to leave, but we're trying to be here for you.
I'll add that we usually do not have Palestinians on the last leg. And the reason is we fear that the Israelis will be extremely harsh on the Palestinians, even more than others. And so Palestinians are often on the legs prior to that, as we're going through Europe and so on. Because it's a little more than 2-month voyage, people don't have 2 months to give. So if they have a week or something or two, then they'll go on an earlier part. But
Yeah.
It's really interesting detail. Another attendee is asking, how do you vet volunteers?
shh, we
That
won't
is
tell you.
the IOF asking that. This
Yeah,
is
that's
the operative in the chat.
Carefully.
Yeah. We just, we have an application process, and a lot of times people know the folks, and they give us references. And I guess we just have that spidey sense, some people call it too. We know when you get to do interviews, but not always, that doesn't always work. But we've been very, very fortunate, and we have had amazing passengers and delegates from all over the world. But it's always, more is better, because we would love to do more ships and get more attention on Gaza and Palestine. But if, like we said at the very beginning too, if folks know, especially high profile folks, but I'm not high profile. I just like doing the work, really. So, and I can do medical and stuff. So everybody is welcome who is into freeing Palestine.
Yeah, one of our friends and organizers, who's also from Washington State and is in love with you now, is friends with a celebrity from high school, so she's gonna try to make that happen.
Oh, great!
Macklemore, Macklemore is a rapper and is very pro-Palestine, and was at the first Palestine march in DC. So, okay, well, she's working on it.
Great. That's what we need.
I'll add that what we do when we do these educational stops is we have events at the docks, and we have graffiti artists decorate the boat. I don't know if you saw some of the pictures earlier of those graffiti on the boats.
That's really cool.
And then musicians do concerts in front of the boat to attract people and so on. So
Yeah.
there are all kinds of opportunities for artists and musicians to support the cause.
Yeah, I mean, and every port was vastly different too, and what they came up with. The port, you know, we communicate with the port months prior and ask them to host us. So we're going to be going to. I've got some ports in Ireland, and so they put together a program, you know, and they bring in their local politicians or their children's groups or whatever, you know, they're inspired to do, and that makes it very fun too, you know. Yeah. And good connections are made, and it's a fun way to get to know people, but also to spread the word and build our solidarity movement.
Okay, I'm going to ask just one more question, and this is going to be my question, and then we can break so everyone can break fast. But obviously you've been doing this work through multiple Israeli aggressions on Gaza, and you've been able to perceive the international response. Is anything different this time? Do you think anything is different in the way people are responding to the situation? Are you optimistic?
So I'll go first, and I'll just say there's a big difference. But again, as Haneen Zoabi is, I'm not doing this because I'm optimistic or pessimistic. I'm doing this to maintain humanity. But I think as unfortunate and as horrible as the suffering that people in Gaza are going through, Israel is showing itself very blatantly,
Yeah.
and so is the United States. And I focus a lot on the language and having conversations with people, because the politicians aren't going to change. We have to, as the civilians, change the situation, change public opinion, and that will change. And so I meet with a group of mostly Zionist Jews once a month, and we have conversations. And we had one this week, and a Zionist Jew totally agree with me that the situation now is to the point where Israel and the U.S. actions are actually helping the Palestinian cause significantly and hurting Israel. And when Chuck Schumer, the highest-ranking Jewish politician, criticizes Netanyahu, that's a watershed moment.
And I would just say the silver lining, if there is any, is the amazing amount of Palestine solidarity that, since 2008, when I started working with it, I have not ever seen it. I mean, and I go to, I give talks and I do my PowerPoints, and, I work with the Rachel Corrie Foundation, and I live way out in the country, and we have 200 or 300 people in our little podunk town that are part of our Palestine solidarity group. And we're on the corners every weekend, and there's a huge turnout, and there's a huge eye-opening moment that a lot of Americans, that we've been trying to pry their eyes open and open their hearts and educate, but I see it now in a way that I haven't seen it. And that's very heartening.
Thank you for everything you're doing. It's really inspiring.
I just want to add too, part of the things we did with the ceasefire campaign on the ballot. So I was part of the uncommitted here in Washington State, and we had a ceasefire, also a write-in, and we had thousands write-in ceasefire, and about 10,000 did uncommitted, and that was in really short order that we got it together, and that's happening all over the country right now. So that is kind of a piece of that inspiration and a little silver lining, where people are like, hey, we don't like business as usual. We're not voting for either of you in this primary. And I think that's extremely powerful. So I want to put a plug in for that for those that have primaries coming up.
We're working on our own ceasefire resolution here in New Orleans. and doing some more political education. But I think that's all the time we have. Thank you guys so much. I think a lot, seeing from the chat and seeing from people what people have been texting us, I think everyone's going to be leaving really inspired by the two of you and by Freedom Flotilla. So I really appreciate you guys taking time in your very busy schedules. Although I think you guys will have some more volunteers to help you with whatever you need after this. So thank you so much. I am going to put the donation link in the chat. I'll also send it around to people in our organizing circles and put it on our social media again to help you guys do more of these missions because we love your work. So thank you
And we have
so
Twitter.
much.
We have around Facebook
Yes.
and Twitter and all that. So yeah, everybody just like that and pass it on.
Yes, please stay
Yes.
tuned.
Okay. I will.
Thank you. Thank you so much for hosting us.
Amazing.
Ramadan Mubarak to you all.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye everyone.